In a few minutes everything was ready. It was very quiet now on the top of the pitch. There was nobody inside, nobody except the earthworm. One half of the earthworm, looking like a great, thick, juicy pink sausage, lay innocently in the sun for all the seagulls to see. The other half of him was dangling down the tunnel. James was crouching close beside the earthworm in the tunnel entrance just below the surface, waiting for the first seagull. He had a loop of silk string in his hands. The old green grasshopper and the ladybug were further down the tunnel, holding on to the earthworm's tail, ready to pull him quickly in out of danger as soon as James gave the word. And far below, in the great hollow stone of the pitch, the glowworm was lighting up the room so that the two spinners, the silkworm and Miss Spider, could see what they were doing. The centipede was down there too, exhorting them both frantically to greater force, and every now and again James could hear his voice coming up faintly from the depths, shouting, "Spin, silkworm, spin, you great fat lazy brute, faster, faster, or we'll throw you to the sharks." "Here comes the first seagull," whispered James. "Keep still now, earthworm, keep still. The rest of you get ready to pull." "Please don't let spike me back the earthworm. I won't. Shh." Out of the corner of one eye, James watched the seagull as it came sweeping down toward the earthworm, and then suddenly it was so close that he could see its small black eyes and its curved beak, and the beak was open, ready to grab a nice piece of flesh out of the earthworm's back. "Pull," shouted James. The old green grasshopper and the ladybug gave the earthworm's tail an enormous tug, and like magic, the earthworm disappeared in the tunnel. At the same time, up went James' hand, and the seagull flew right into the loop of silk that he was holding out. The loop, which had been cleverly made, tightened just the right amount, but not too much, around his neck, and the seagull was captured. "Why?" shouted the old green grasshopper, peering out of the tunnel. "Well done, James." Up flew the seagull, with James paying out of the silk string as it went. He gave it about 50 yards and then tied the string to the stem of the pitch. "Next one," he shouted, jumping back into the tunnel. "Up you get again, earthworm. Bring up some more silk, centipede." "Oh, I don't like this at all," wailed the earthworm. "It's only just missed me. I even felt the wind on my back as it went swishing past." "Shh," whispered James. "Keep still. Here comes another one." So they did again and again and again and again, and the seagulls kept coming, and James caught them one after the other and tethered them to the pitch stem. 100 seagulls, he shouted, wiping the sweat from his face. "Keep going," they cried. "Keep going, James. 200 seagulls, 300 seagulls, 400 seagulls." The sharks, as tough, sensing that they were in danger of losing their prey, were hurling themselves at the pitch more furiously than ever, and the pitch was sinking lower and lower still in the water. 500 seagulls, James shouted. "Silkworm says he's running out of the silk," yelled the centipede from below. "He says he can't keep it up much longer. No can Miss Spider on. Tell them they've got to go. James answered. They can't stop now. We are lifting, somebody shouted. No, we are not. I felt in. Put on another seagull, quick. Quiet, everybody, quiet. Here's one coming now. This was the 501st seagull, and the moment that James caught in it and tethered it to the stem with all the others, the whole enormous peach suddenly started rising up slowly out of the water. Look at, here we go, hold on boys. But then it stopped, and there it hung. It hovered and swayed, but it went no higher. The bottom of it was just touching the water. It was like a delicately balanced scale that need only the tiniest push to tip it one way or the other. One more will do it, shouted the old green grasshopper, looking out of the tunnel. We are almost there. And now came the big moment. Quickly, the 502nd seagull was caught and harnessed to the peach stem, and then suddenly, but slowly, majestically, like some fabulous golden balloon, with all the seagulls straining at the string above, the giant peach rose up, dripping out of the water, and began climbing towards the heavens. Yes, thank you, her voice answered from below. I'm coming up now, and up she came, climbing foot over foot up the silk thread, and at the same time tucking the thread back cleverly into her body as she climbed past. Is it awful? They asked her. Is it all eaten away? Are there great holes in everywhere? Miss Spider clambered back onto the deck with a pleased but also a rather puzzled look on her face. You won't believe this, she said, but actually there is hardly any damage down there at all. The peach is almost untouched. There are just a few pieces out of it here and there, but nothing more. You must be mistaken, James told her. Of course she's mistaken, the centipede said. I promise you I'm not, Miss Spider answered. But there were hundreds of sharks around dusk. They champed the water into a froth. We saw their great mouths opening and shutting. I don't care what you saw, Miss Spider answered. They certainly didn't do much damage to the peach. Then why did we start sinking? The centipede asked. Perhaps we didn't start sinking, the old green grasshopper suggested. Perhaps we were all so frightened that we simply imagined it. This in point of fact, we closer to the truth than any of them knew. A shark, you see, has an extremely long sharp nose, and its mouth is set very awkwardly underneath its face was a long way back. This makes it more or less impossible for it to get its teeth into a vast, smooth curving surface such as the side of a peach. Even if the creature turns onto its back, it still can't do it because the nose always gets in the way. If you have ever seen a small dog trying to get its teeth into an enormous ball, then you will be able to imagine roughly how it was with the sharks and the peach. It must have been some kind of magic, the ladybug said. The holes must have healed up by themselves. Oh, look, there's a ship below us, shouted James. Everybody rushed to the side and peered over. None of them had ever seen a ship before. It looks like a big one. It's got 3 funnels. You can even see people on the decks. Let's wave to them. Do you think they can see us? Neither James nor any of the others knew it, but the ship was now passing beneath them was actually the Queen Mary sailing out of the English Channel on her way to America, and on the bridge of the Queen Mary, the astonished captain was standing with a group of his officers, all of them gaping at the great round ball hovering overhead. I don't like it, the captain said. Nor do I, said the first officer. Do you think it's following us, said the second officer. I tell you I don't like it, muttered the captain. It could be dangerous, the first officer said. That's it, cried the captain. It's a secret weapon, holy cats. Send a message to the Queen at once. The country must be warned, and give me my telescope. The first officer handed the telescope to the captain. The captain put it to his eye. There's birds everywhere, he cried. The whole sky is teeming with birds. What in the world are they doing? And wait a second. There are people on it. I can see them moving. There's do I have this darn thing focused right? It looks like a little boy in short trousers. Yes, I can distinctly see a little boy in short trousers standing up there, and there's a sort of giant ladybug. Now just a minute, Captain, the first officer said, and a colossal green grasshopper. Captain, the first officer said sharply, Captain, please. And a mammoth spider. Oh dear, he's been at the whiskey again, whispered the second officer. And an enormous, simply enormous centipede, screamed the captain. Call the ship's doctor, the first officer said. Our captain is not well. A moment later, the great round hole disappeared into a cloud, and the people on the ship never saw it again. They shouted the old green grasshopper. Yes, thank you, her voice answered from below. I'm coming up now, and up she came, climbing foot over foot up the silk thread, and at the same time tucking the thread back cleverly into her body as she climbed past in. Is it awful? They asked. Is it all eaten away? Are there great holes in it everywhere? Miss Spider clambered back onto the deck with a pleased but also a rather puzzled look on her face. You won't believe this, she said, but actually there's hardly any damage down there at all. The peach is almost untouched. There are just a few teeny pieces out of it here and there, but nothing more. You must be mistaken, James told her. Of course she's mistaken, the centipede said. I promise you I'm not Miss Spider, answered. But there were hundreds of sharks around us. They churned the water into a flood. We saw their great mouths opening and shutting. I don't care what you saw, Miss Spider answered. They certainly didn't do much damage to the peach. Then why did we start sinking? The centipede asked. Perhaps we didn't start sinking, the old green grasshopper suggested. Perhaps we were also frightened that we simply imagined it. This in point of fact was closer to the truth than any of them knew. A shark, you see, has an extremely long sharp nose, and its mouth is set very awkwardly underneath its face and a long way back. This makes it more or less impossible for it to get its teeth into a vast, smooth, curving surface, such as the side of a peach. Even if the creature turns onto its back, it still can't do it because the nose always gets in the way. If you have ever seen a small dog trying to get its teeth into an enormous ball, then you will be able to imagine roughly how it was with the sharks of the peach. It must have been some kind of magic, the ladybug said. The holes must have healed up by themselves. Oh, look, there is a ship below us, shouted James. Everybody rushed to the side and peered over. None of them had ever seen a ship before. It looks like a big one. It's got three funnels. You can even see the people on the decks. Let's wait to them. Do you think they can see us? Neither James nor any of the other news it. But up on the beach itself, everyone was still happy and excited. I wonder where we'll finish up this time, the earthworm said. Who cares, they answered. Seagulls always go back to the land, sooner or later. Up and up they went, high above the highest clouds, the peach swaying gently from side to side as it floated along. Wouldn't this be a perfect time for a little music? The ladybug asked. How about it, old green grasshopper? With pleasure, dear lady, old green grasshopper answered, bowing from the west. Oh, hooray! He is going to play for us, they cried, and immediately the whole company sat themselves down in a circle around the old green musician, and the concert began. From the moment that the first note was struck, the audience became completely spellbound, and as for James, never had he heard such beautiful music as this. In the garden at home on summer evenings, he had listened many times to the sound of grasshoppers chirping in the grass, and he had always liked the noise that they made. But this was a different kind of noise altogether. This was real music, chords, harmonies, tunes, and all the rest of it. And what a wonderful instrument the old green grasshopper was playing upon. It was like a violin. It was almost exactly as though he were playing upon a violin. The bow of violin, the part that moved was his back leg. The strings of the violin, the part that made sound was the edge of his wing. He was using only the top of his back leg, the thigh, and he was stroking this up and down against the edge of his wing with incredible skill, sometimes slowly, sometimes fast, but always with same easy flowing action. It was precisely the way a clever violinist would have used his bow, and the music came pouring out and filled the whole blue sky around them with magic melodies. When the first part was finished, everyone clapped madly, and Miss Spider stood up and shouted, "Bravo! Encore! Give us some money." "Do you like that, James?" the old green grasshopper asked, smiling at the small boy. "Oh, I loved it," James answered. "It was beautiful. It was as though you had a real violin in your hands." "A real violin," the old green grasshopper cried. "Good heavens, I like that. My dear boy, I'm a real violin. It's a part of my own body." "But do all grasshoppers play their music on violins the same way as you do?" James asked him. "No," he answered, "not all. If you want to know, I happen to be a short-horned grasshopper. I have two short feelers coming out of my head. Can you see them? There they are. They are quite short, aren't they? That's why they call me a shorthorn, and we shorthorns are the only ones who play our music in the violin style using a bow. My longhorned relatives, the edge of their two top wings together, they're not violinists, they're wing rubbers, and a rather inferior noise these wing rubbers produce too, if I may say so. It sounds more like a banjo than a fiddle. How fascinating this all is," cried James, "and to think that up until now I ever wondered how a grasshopper made his sounds." "My dear young fellow," the old green grasshopper said gently, "there are a whole lot of things in this world of ours that you haven't started wondering about yet. Where, for example, do you think that I keep my ears? Your ears? Why in your head, of course." Everyone burst out laughing. "You mean you don't even know what?" cried the centipede. "Try again," said the old green grasshopper, smiling at James. "You can't possibly keep them all anywhere else." "Oh, can't I? Well, I give up. Where do you keep them?" "Right there," the old green grasshopper said. One on each side of my tummy." "It's not true." "Of course it's true. What's so peculiar about that? You ought to see where my cousins, the crickets and the katydids, keep theirs. Where do they keep them? In their legs, one in each front leg, just below the knee. You mean you didn't know that either? The sandwich said scornfully. You're joking, James said. Nobody could possibly have his ears in his legs. Why not? Because it's ridiculous, that's why. You know what I think is ridiculous, the sandwich said, grinning away as usual. I don't mean to be rude, but I think it's ridiculous to have ears on the size of one's head. It certainly looks ridiculous. You ought to take a peek in the mirror someday and see for yourself. Pest, cried the earthworm. Why must you always be so rude and rambunctious to everyone? You ought to apologize to James at once. James didn't want the earthworm and the centipede to get into another argument, so he said quickly to the earthworm, "Tell me, do you play any kind of music?" "No, but I do other things, some of which are really quite extraordinary," the earthworm said, brightening. "Such as what?" asked James. "Well," earthworm said, next time you stand in a field or in a garden and look around you, then just remember this, that every grain of soil upon the surface of the land, every tiny little bit of soil that you can see has actually passed through the body of an earthworm during the last few years. Isn't that wonderful?" "It's not possible," said James. "My dear boy, it's a fact." "You mean actually swallow soil?" "Like mad," the earthworm said proudly, in one end and out the other. "But what's the point?" What do you mean, what's the point?" "Why do you do it?" "Why do it for the farmers? It makes the soil nice and light and crumbly so that things will grow well in it. If you really want to know, the farmers couldn't do without us. We are essential, we are vital, so it's only natural that the farmer should love us. He loves us even more, I believe, than he loves the ladybug." "The ladybug," said James, turning to look at her. Do they love you? Do they love you too?" "I'm told that they do," the ladybug answered, modestly, blushing all over. "In fact, I understand that in some places the farmers love us so much that they go out and buy ladybugs by the sackful and take them home and set them free in their fields. They are very pleased when they have lots of ladybugs in their fields." "But why?" James asked. "Because we gobble up all the nasty little insects that are gobbling up all the farmers' crops. It helps enormously, and we ourselves don't charge a penny for our services." I think you're wonderful," James told her. "Can I ask you one special question?" "Please do." Well, is it really true that I can tell how old a ladybug is by counting her spots?" "Oh no, that's just a children's story," the ladybug said. "We never change our spots. Some of us, of course, are born with more spots than others, but we never change them. The number of spots that a ladybug has simply a way of showing which branch of the family she belongs to. I, for example, as you can see for yourself, am a nine-spotted ladybug. I'm very lucky. It's a fine thing to be. It's indeed, said James, gazing at the beautiful scarlet shell with 9 black spots on it. On the other hand, the ladybug went on, some of less fortunate relatives have no more than 2 spots altogether on their shells. Can you imagine that? They are called two-spotted ladybugs, and very common and ill-mannered they are, I regret to say. And then, of course, you have the 5-spotted ladybugs as well. They are much nicer than the 2-spotted ones, although I myself find them a trifle too saucy for my taste. But they are all of them loved, said James. Yes, the ladybug answered quietly. They are all of them loved. It seems that almost everyone around here is loved, said James. How nice this is. Not me, cried the centipede happily. I'm a pet and I'm proud of it. Oh, I'm such a shocking, dreadful pest. Hear, hear, the earthworm said. But what about you, Miss Spider asked James. Aren't you also much loved in the world? Alas, no, Miss Spider answered, sighing long and loud. I'm not loud at all, and yet I do nothing but good. All day long I catch flies and mosquitoes in my webs. I'm a decent person. I know you are, said James. It's very unfair that the way we spiders are treated, Miss Spider went on. Why, only last week your own horrible aunt Sponge flushed my poor dear father down the plug hole in the bathtub. Oh, how awful, cried James. I watched the whole thing from a corner up in the ceiling, Miss Spider murmured. It was ghastly. We never saw him again. A large tear rolled down her cheek and fell with a splash on the floor. But it's not very unlucky to kill a spider, James inquired, looking around at others. Of course it's unlucky to kill a spider, shouted the centipede. It's about the unluckiest thing anyone can do. Look what happened to Aunt Sponge after she'd done that. Bump. We all felt in, didn't we? As the peach went over her. Oh, what a lovely pump that must have been for you, Miss Spider. It was very satisfactory, Miss Spider answered. Will you sing us a song about it, please? So the centipede did. Aunt Sponge was terrifically fat and tremendously flabby at that. Her tummy and waist were as soggy as paste. It was worse on the place where she sat. So she said, I must make myself flat. I must make myself sleek as a cat. I shall do without dinner to make myself thinner. But along came the peach, oh, the beautiful peach, and made her far tinier than that. That was very nice, Miss Spider said. Now sing one about Aunt Spiker. With pleasure, the centipede answered, grinning. Unsparkle was thin as a wire, and as dry as a bone, only drier. She was so long and thin. If you carried her in, you could use her for poking the fire. I must do something quickly, she frowned. I want fat. I want pound upon pound. I must eat lots and lots of marshmallows and chalks till I start bulging out all around. Yes, she announced. I have sworn that I'll alter my figure by dawn, cried the peach with a snigger. TLL, alter your figure. And Iran's her out on the lawn. Everybody clapped and called out for more songs from the Sandpit, who at once launched into his favorite song of all. Once upon a time, when pigs were swine and monkeys chewed tobacco, and hens took snuff to make themselves tough, and the ducks said quack, 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 and porcupines drank fiery wines, and goats ate tapioca, and old Mother Hubbard got stuck in the sea. Look out, Sandbed, cried James, look out. The Sandbed, who had begun dancing wildly around the deck during the song, had suddenly gone too close to the downward curving edge of the pit, and for 3 awful seconds he had stood teetering on the brink, swinging his legs frantically in circles in an effort to stop himself from falling over backward in space. But before anyone could reach him, down he went. He gave a shriek of terror as he fell, and the others, rushing to the side and peering over, saw his poor long body tumbling over and over through the air, getting smaller and smaller until it was out of sight. Silkworm yelled James. Quick, start spinning. The silkworm sighed, for she was still very tired from spinning all that silk for the seagulls, but she did as she was told. I'm going down after him, cried James, grabbing the silk string as it started coming out of the silkworm and tying the end of it around his waist. The rest of you hold onto silkworm so I don't pull her over with me, and later on, if you feel 3 tugs on the string, start holding me up again. He jumped and he went tumbling down after the sandpit, down toward the sea below, and you can imagine how quickly the silkworm had spun to keep up with the speed of his fall. We'll never saw either of them again, cried the ladybug. Oh dear, just when we were all so happy too. Miss Spider, the glowworm, and the ladybug all began to cry. So did the earthworm. I don't care a bit about centipede. The earthworm stopped. but I really did love that little boy. Very softly, the old green grasshopper started to play the funeral march on his violin, and by the time he had finished, everyone, including himself, was in flood of tears. Suddenly, there came 3 sharp tugs on the rope. "Pull!" shouted the old green grasshopper. "Everyone get behind me and pull." There was about a mile of string to be hauled in, but all worked in like mad, and in the end, over the side of the pit, 3 appeared, dripping wet James with a dripping wet centipede, clinging to him tightly with all 42 of his legs. "He saved me," gasped the centipede. "He swam around in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean until he found me, my dear boy," the old green grasshopper said, patting James on the back. "I do congratulate you." "My boots," cried the centipede. "Just look at my precious books. They're ruined by the water." "Be quiet," the earthworm said. "You're lucky to be alive." Are we still going up and up?" asked James. "We certainly are," answered the old green grasshopper, "and it's beginning to get dark. And now it will soon be night. Why don't we all go below and keep warm until tomorrow morning?" Miss Spider suggested. "No," the old green grasshopper said. "I think that would be very unwise. It will be safer if we all stay up here throughout the night and keep watch. Then if anything happens, we shall anyway be ready for it." James Henry Trotter and his companions crouched close together on the top of pitch as the night began closing around them. Clouds like mountains towered high above their heads on all sides, mysterious, menacing, overwhelming. Gradually it grew darker and darker, and then a pale 3/4 moon came up over the tops of the clouds and cast an eerie light over the whole scene. The giant peach swayed gently from side to side as it floated along, and the hundreds of silky white strings going upward from its stem were beautiful in the moonlight. So also was the great flock of seagulls over it. There was not a sound anywhere. Traveling upon the pitch was not in the least like traveling in an airplane. The airplane comes clattering and roaring through the sky, and whatever might be lurking secretly up in the great cloud mountains goes running for cover at its approach. That is why people who travel in airplanes never see anything. But the pitch, yes, the pitch was a soft, steely traveler, making no noise at all as it floated along. And several times during that long silent night, right high up over the middle of the ocean in the moonlight, James and his friends saw things that no one had ever seen before. Once, as they drifted silently past a massive white cloud, they saw on the top of it a group of strange, tall, wispy-looking things that were about twice the height of ordinary men. They were not easy to see at first because they were almost as white as the cloud itself, but as the pitch sailed closer, it became obvious that these things were actually living creatures, tall, wispy, red-like, shadowy, white creatures who looked as though they were made out of a mixture of cotton, wool, and candy floss and thin white hairs. Oh, the ladybug said, I don't like this at all. Shh, James whispered back. Don't let them hear you. They must be cloudmen. Cloudmen, they murmured, huddling closer together for comfort. Oh dear, oh dear. I'm glad I'm blind and I can see them, the earthworm said, or I would probably scream. I hope they don't turn around and see us, Miss Spider stammered. Do you think they would eat us? The earthworm asked. They would eat you, the centipede answered, grinning. They would cut you up like a salami and eat you in thin slices. The poor earthworm began to quiver all over the fright. But what are they doing? The old green grasshopper whispered. I don't know, James answered softly. Let's watch and see. The cloudmen were all standing in a group, and they were doing something peculiar with their hands. First, they would reach out and grab handfuls of cloud. Then they would roll these handfuls of cloud in their fingers until they turned into what looked like large white marbles. Then they would toss the marbles to one side and quickly grab more bits of cloud and start over again. It was all very silent and mysterious. The pile of marbles beside them kept growing larger and larger. Soon there was a truckload of them there at least. They must be absolutely mad, the centipede said. There's nothing to be afraid of here. Be quiet, you passed, the earthworm whispered. We shall all be eaten if they see us. But the clubmen were much too busy with what they were doing to have noticed the great peach floating silently up behind them. Then the watchers on the peach saw one of the cloudmen raising his long wispy arms above his head, and they heard him shouting, "All right, boys, that's enough. Get the shawls." And all the other cloudmen immediately let out a strange high-pitched whoop of joy and started jumping up and down and waving their arms in the air. Then they picked up enormous shovels and rushed over to the pile of marbles and began shoveling them as fast as they could over the side of the cloud in space. Down they go, that they chanted as they worked. Down they go. Hail and snow, freeze and sneeze, and noses will blow. It's hailstones, whispered James excitedly. They've been making hailstones and now they are showering them down onto the people in the world below. Hailstones, the sandpit said. That's ridiculous. This is summertime. You don't have hailstones in summertime. They are practicing for the winter, James told him. I don't believe it, shouted Sandpit, raising his voice. Shh, the others whispered, and James said softly, for heaven's sake, Sandpit, don't make so much noise. The Sandpit roared with laughter. Those imbeciles couldn't hear anything, he cried. They are deaf as doorknobs. You watch. And before anyone could stop him, he had cupped his front feet to his mouth and was yelling at the clothesman as loud as he could. Idiots, he yelled. Nincompoops, half-wits, blunderheads, asses. What on earth do you think you're doing over there? The effect was immediate. The clubmen jumped around as if they had been stung by wasps. And when they saw the great golden peach floating past them, not 50 yards away in the sky, they gave a yelp of surprise and dropped their shovels to the ground. And there they stood with the moonlight and there they stood with the moonlight streaming down all over them, absolutely motionless, like a group of tall, white, hairy statues, staring at the gigantic fleet as it went sailing by. The passengers on the beach sat frozen with terror, looking back at the cloudman and wondering what was going to happen next. Now you have done it. You lotsome pest, whispered the earthworm to the sandpit. I'm not frightened of them, shouted the sandpit. And show everybody once again that he wasn't, he stood up to his full height and started dancing about and making insulting signs of the clothman with all 42 of his legs. This evidently infuriated the clothman beyond belief. All at once, they spun around and grabbed great handfuls of hailstones and rushed to the edge of the cloud and started throwing them at the peach, shrieking with fury all the time. Look out, cried James. Quick, lie down, lie flat on the deck. It was lucky they did. A large hailstone can hurt you as much as a rock or a lump of lead if it is thrown hard enough. And my goodness, how those cloudmen could throw. The hailstones came whizzing through the air like bullets from a machine gun, and James could hear them smashing against the sides of the peach and burying themselves in the peach flesh with horrible squelching noises, plop, 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 and they ping, 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 ping as they bounced off the poor ladybug's shell. because she couldn't lie as flat the others, and then crack as one of them hit the centipede right on the nose, and crack again as another one hit him somewhere else. Oh, he cried, oh, stop, 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 stop. But the cloudman had no intention of stopping. James could see them rushing about on the cloud like a lot of huge hairy ghosts, picking up hailstones from the pile, dashing to the edge of the clouds, hurling the hailstones at the peach, dashing back again to get more, and then, when the pile of stones was all gone, they simply grabbed handfuls of cloth and made as many more as they wanted, and much bigger ones now. Some of them as large as cannonballs. Quickly, cried James. Down the tunnel or we'll all be wiped out. There was a rush for the tunnel entrance, and half a minute later everybody was safely downstairs inside the stand of the pitch, trembling with fright and listening to the noise of the hailstones as they came crashing against the side of the pitch. "I'm a wreck," groaned the centipede. "I'm wounded all over." "It serves you right," said the earthworm. "Would somebody kindly look and see if my shell is cracked?" the ladybug said. "Give us some light," shouted the old green grasshopper. "I can't," wailed the glowworm. "They've broken my bulb." Then put in another one," the centipede said. "Be quiet a moment," said James. "Listen, I do believe they are not hitting us anymore." They all stopped talking and listened. Yes, the noise has ceased. The hailstones were no longer smashing against the pitch. "We have left them behind. The seagulls must have pulled us away out of danger. Hooray! Let's go up and see." Cautiously, with James going first, they all climbed back up the tunnel. James poked his head out and looked around. "It's all clear," he called. "I can see them anyway." One by one, the travelers came out again onto the top of the pitch and gazed carefully around. The moon was still shining as brightly as ever, and there were still plenty of huge shimmering cloud mountains on all sides. But there were no cloudmen inside them. "The pitch is leaking," shouted the old green grasshopper, peering over the side. "It's full of holes, and the juice is dripping out everywhere." "That does it," cried the earthworm. If the pitch is leaking, then we shall surely sink." "Don't be an ass," the centipede told him. "We are not in the water now." "Oh, look," shouted Ladybug. Look, over there." Everybody swung round to look. In the distance and directly ahead of them, they now saw a most extraordinary sight. It was a kind of arch, a colossal curvy-shaped thing that reached high up into the sky and came down again at both ends. The ends were resting upon a huge flat cloud that was as big as a desert. Now, what in the world is that? Asked James. It's a bridge. It's an enormous hoop cut in half. It's a giant horseshoe standing upside down. Stop me if I'm wrong, murmured Sandbird, going white in the face. But might those not be cloudmen climbing all over it? There was a dreadful silence. The pitch floated closer and closer. They are cloudmen. There are hundreds of them, thousands, millions. I don't want to hear about it. Shiveked the poor blind earthworm. I'd rather be on the end of a fish hook and used as a bait than come up against those terrible creatures again. I'd rather be afraid alive and eaten by a Mexican, wailed the old green grasshopper. Please keep quiet, whispered James. It's our only hope. They crouched very, very still on top of the beach, staring at the cloudman. The whole surface of the cloud was literally swarming with them, and there were hundreds more up above climbing about on that monstrous crazy arc. But what's that thing? Whispered the ladybug. And what are they doing? What are they doing to do it? I don't care what they are doing to it, the Sandbird said, scuttling over the tunnel entrance. I'm not staying up here. Goodbye. But the rest of them were too frightened or too hypnotized by the whole affair to make a move. Do you know what James whispered? What they said? What? That enormous arch. They seem to be painting it. They got pots of paint and big brush. You look. And he was quite right. The travelers were close enough now to see that this was exactly what the clubmen were doing. They all had huge brushes in their hands, and they were splashing the paint onto the great curvy arch in a frenzy of speed. So fast, in fact, that in a few minutes the whole of the art became covered with the most glorious colors: reds, blues, greens, yellows, and purples. It's a rainbow, everyone said at once. They are making a rainbow. Oh, isn't it beautiful? Just look at those colors, said that they shouted. You must come up and see this. They were so enthralled by the beauty and brilliance of the rainbow and that they forgot to keep their voices low any longer. The Sandbird poked his head cautiously out of the tunnel entrance. Well, he said. I've always wondered how those things were made. But why all the ropes? What are they doing with those ropes? Good heavens, they are pushing it off. of the cloud, cried James. There it goes. They are lowering it down to the earth with ropes. And I'll tell you something else, the sandpit said sharply. If I'm not greatly mistaken, we ourselves are going to bump right into it. Bless my soul. He is right, the old green grasshopper exclaimed. The rainbow was now dangling in the air below the cloud. The peach was also just below the level of the cloud, and it was heading directly toward the rainbow, traveling rather fast. We are lost, Spider cried, wringing her feet again. The end had come. I can't stand it, wailed the earthworm. Tell me what's happening. We are going to miss it, shouted the ladybug. No, we are not. Yes, we are. Yes, no. Oh my heavens. Hold on, everybody, James called out. And suddenly there was a tremendous thud as the peach went crashing into the top of the rainbow. This was followed by an awful splintering noise as the enormous rainbow snapped right across the middle and became two separate pieces. The next thing that happened was extremely unfortunate. The ropes that the cloudman had been using for lowering the rainbow got tangled up with the silk strings that went up from the peach to the seagrass. The peach was trapped. Panic and pandemonium broke out among the travelers, and James Henry Trotter, glancing up quickly, saw the faces of 1,000 furious cloudmen peering down at him over the edge of the clouds. The faces had almost no shape at all because of the long white hairs that covered them. There were no noses, no mouths, no ears, no chins. Only the eyes were visible in each face, two small black eyes glinting malevolently through the hairs. Then came the most frightening thing of all. One cloudman, a huge hairy creature who must have been 14 feet tall at least, suddenly stood up and made a tremendous leap off the side of the clouds, trying to get to one of the 6 strings above the pitch. James and his friends saw him go flying through the air above them, his arms outstretched in front of him, reaching for the nearest string, and they saw him grab it and sliding to it with his hands and legs. And then very, very slowly, hand over hand, he began to come down the string. Mercy, help, save us, cried the ladybug. He's coming down to eat us, wailed the old green grasshopper. Jump overboard. Then eat the earthworm first, shouted the centipede. It's no good eating me. I'm full of bones like a keeper. Centipede yelled James. Quickly. But through that string, the one he's coming down on, Sandpit rushed over to the stem of the peach and took the sixth string in his teeth and beat through it with one snap of his jaws. Immediately far above them, a single seagull was seen to come away from the rest of the flock and go flying off with a long string trailing from its neck, and clinging desperately to the end of the string, shouting and cursing with fury, was the huge hairy cloudman. Up and up he went, swinging across the moonlight sky, and James Henry Trotter, watching him with delight, said, my goodness, he must weigh almost nothing at all for one seagull to be able to pull him up like that. He must be all hair and air. The rest of the cloudmen were so flabbergasted at seeing one of their company carried away in this manner that they let go the ropes they were holding, and then of course down went the rainbow, both halves of it together, tumbling toward the earth below. This freed the peach, which at once began sailing away from that terrible cloud. But the travelers were not in the clear yet. The infuriated cloudman jumped up and ran after them along the cloud, pelting them mercilessly with all sorts of hard and horrible objects: empty paint buckets, paint brushes, step ladders, stools, saucepans, frying pans, rotten eggs, dead rats, bottles of hair oil, anything those brats could lay their hands on came raining down upon the peach. One clubman, taken very carefully, tipped a gallon of thick purple paint over the edge of the cloud right onto the sandpit himself. The sandpit screamed with anger. "My legs," he cried. "They are all sticking together. I can't walk, and my eyelids won't open. I can't see, and my boots are ruined." But for the moment, everyone was far too busy dodging the things that the clubmen were trying to pay any attention to the sandpit. "The paint is drying," he moaned. "It's going hard. I can't move my legs. I can't move anything." "You can still move your mouth," the earthworm said. And that's a great pity." James babbled the sandpit. Please help me. Wash off this paint. Scrape it off. Anything." It seemed like a long time before the seagulls were able to pull the peach away from that horrible rainbow cloud, but they managed it at last, and then everybody gathered around the wretched sandpit and began arguing about the best way to get the paint of his body. He really did look a sight. He was purple all over, and now that the paint was beginning to dry and harden, he was forced to sit very stiff and upright as though he were encased in cement, and all 42 of his legs were sticking out straight in front of him like rods. He tried to say something, but his lips wouldn't move. All he could do now was to make gurgling noises in his throat. The old green grasshopper reached out and touched him carefully on the stomach, but how could it possibly have dried so quickly, he asked. It's about paint, James answered. Rainbow paint dries very quick and very hard. I detest paint, Miss Spider announced. It frightens me. It reminds me of Spiker. The late grandmother stepped into it by mistake when it was still wet, and there she stuck, and all through the night we could hear her calling to us, saying help, 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 and it was heartbreaking to listen to her. But what could we do? Not a thing until the next day when the paint had dried, and then of course we all rushed over to her and calmed her down and gave her some food. Believe it or not, she lived for 6 months like that, upside down on the ceiling with her legs stuck permanently in the paint. She really did. We fed her every day. We brought her fresh fly straight from the web. But then on the 26th of April last, unsponged, the late unsponged, happened to glance up at Celine, and she spotted her. A spider, she cried. A disgusting spider. Quick, fetch me the mop with the long handle. And then, oh, it was awful. I can't bear to think of it. Miss Spider wiped away a tear and looked sadly at Centipede. You poor thing, she murmured. I do feel sorry for you. It will never come off. The earthworm said brightly. Our Centipede will never move again. He will return into a statue, and we shall be able to put him in the middle of the lawn with a bird bed on the top of his head. We could try peeling him like a banana, the old green grasshopper suggested, or rubbing him with sandpaper, the ladybug said. Now if he stuck out his tongue, the earthworm said, smiling a little for perhaps the first time in his life. If he stuck it out really far, then we could all catch hold of it and start pulling. And if we pulled hard enough, we could turn him inside out, and he would have a new skin. There was a pause while the others considered this interesting proposal. I think James said slowly, I think that the best thing to do. Then he stopped. What was that? He asked quickly. I heard a voice. I heard something. I heard someone shouting. They all raised their heads, listening. Shh, there's again. But the voice was too far away for them to hear what it was saying. It's a clubman, Miss Spider cried. I just know it's a clubman. They're after us again. It's a clubman. It came from above, the earthworm said, and automatically everybody looked upwards. Everybody except the centipede, who couldn't move. Ouch, they said. Help, mercy. We are going to catch it this time. For what they know so swirling and twisting directly over their heads was an immense black cloud, a terrible, dangerous, thunder-looking thing that began to rumble and roar even as they were staring at it. And then, from high up on the top of the cloud, the firewire voice came down to them once again, this time very loud and clear. On with the fastest, it shouted. On with the fastest, on with the fastest. 3 seconds later, the whole underneath of the cloud seemed to split and burst open like a paper bag, and then out came the water. They saw it coming. It was quite easy to see because it wasn't just raindrops. It wasn't raindrops at all. It was a great salt mass of water that might have been a lake or a whole ocean dropping out of the sky on top of them, and down it came, down and down and down and down, crashing first onto the seagulls and then onto the beach itself, while the poor travelers shrieked with fear and groped around frantically for something to catch hold of. The peach stem, the silk strings, anything they could find, and all the time the water came pouring and roaring down upon them, bouncing and smashing and sloshing and slashing and swashing and swirling and surging and whirling and gargling and gushing and rushing and rushing, and it was like being pinned down underneath the biggest waterfall in the world and not being able to get out. They couldn't speak, they couldn't see, they couldn't breathe, and James Henry Trotter holding on madly to one of the silk strings above the peach stem, told himself that this must surely be end of everything at last. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the delegate stopped. They were out of it, and it was all over. The wonderful seagulls had flown right through it and had come out safely on the other side. Once again, the giant seagulls had flown right through its end, had come out safely on the other side. Once again, the giant peach was sailing peacefully through the mysterious moonlit sky. "I'm drowned," gasped the old green grasshopper, spitting out water by the pint. It's gone right through my skin," the earthworm groaned. "I always thought my skin was waterproof, but it isn't, and now I'm full of rain. Look at me," shouted the centipede. Exactly. It washed me clean. The pain's all gone. I can move again. That's the worst news I've had in a long time," the earthworm said. The centipede was dancing around the deck and turning somersaults in the air and singing at the top of his voice. "Oh, hooray for the storm and the rain. I can move. I don't feel any pain. And now I'm a pest. I'm the biggest and best. The most marvelous pest." Once again, "Oh, do shut up," the old green grasshopper said. "Look at me," cried the centipede. Look at me. I'm freed. Not a stretch, nor a breeze, nor a bleach. To his grave, this fine gent, they all thought they had sent, and I very near went. Oh, I very near went. But they sent quite the wrong centipede. How fast we are going all of a sudden," the ladybug said. "I wonder why. I don't think the seagulls like this place any better than we do," James answered. "I imagine they want to get out of it as soon as they can. They got a bad fright in that storm we have just been through." Faster and faster flew the seagulls, skimming across the sky at a tremendous pace, with the peach trailing out behind them. Cloud after cloud went by on either side, all of them ghostly white in the moonlight, and several more times during the night the travelers caught glimpses of clubmen moving around on the tops of these clouds and working their sinister magic upon the world below. Once they passed a snow machine in operation, with the clubman turning the handle and a blizzard of snowflakes blowing out of the great funnel above. They saw the huge drums that were used for making thunder, and the clubmen beating them furiously with long hammers. They saw he frost factories, and the wind producers, and the places where cyclones and tornadoes were manufactured, and sand spinning down toward the earth. And once deep in the hollow of a large blowy cloud, they spotted something that could only have been a cloudless city, and there were caves everywhere running into the cloud, and at the entrance to the caves, the cloudman's wives were crouching over little stoves with frying pans in their hands, frying snowballs for their husbands' suppers, and hundreds of cloudman's children were frisking about all over the place and shivering with laughter and sliding down the billows of the cloud on toboggans. An hour later, just before dawn, the travelers heard a soft whooshing noise above their heads, and they glanced up and saw an immense grey, bat-like creature swooping down towards them out of the dark. It circled round the pitch, flapping its great wings slowly in the moonlight and staring at the travelers. Then it uttered a series of long, deep, melancholy cries and flew off again into the night. Oh, I do wish the morning would come, Spider said, shivering all over. It won't be long. It won't be long now, James answered. Look, scanning glider over there already. They all sat in silence, watching the sun as it came up slowly over the rim of their horizon. Friday. And when the full daylight came at last, they all got to their feet and stretched their poor crumbling bodies, and then the centipede, who always seemed to see things first, shouted, "Look, there's Lance below. He's right," they cried, running to the edge of the pit and peering over. Hurrah! It looks like streets and houses, but how enormous is it all is. A vast city, glistening in the early morning sunshine, lay spread out there 1,000 feet below them. At that height, the cars were like little beetles crawling along the streets, and people walking on the pavements looked no larger than tiny grains of salt. But what tremendous tall buildings, exclaimed the ladybug. I've never seen anything like them before in England. Which town do you think it is? This couldn't possibly be England, said the old green grasshopper. Then where is it? Asked Miss Spider. You know what those buildings are, shouted James, jumping up and down, which exclaims, those are skyscrapers, so this must be America, and that, my friends, means that we have crossed the Atlantic Ocean overnight. You don't mean it, they cried. It's not possible. It's incredible. It's unbelievable. I've always dreamed of going to America, cried the centipede. I had a friend once who knows how on earth are we going to get down to earth. Ask James, said the ladybug. I don't think that should be so very difficult, James told them. All we'll have to do is to cut loose a few seagulls. Not too many, mind you, but just enough so that the others can't quite keep us up in the air. Then down we shall go, slowly and gently, until we reach the ground. Centipede will bite through the strings for us, one at a time. Far below them, in the city of New York, something like pandemonium was breaking out. A great round ball as big as a house had been sighted hovering high up in sky over the very center of Manhattan, and the cry had gone up that it was an enormous bomb sent over by another country to blow the whole city to smithereens. Air raid sirens began wailing in every section. All radio and television programs were interrupted with announcements that the population must go down into their cellars immediately. 1 million people walking in the streets on their way to work looked up into the sky and saw the monster hovering above them, and started running for the nearest subway entrance to take cover. Generals grabbed hold of telephones and shouted orders to everyone they could think of. The mayor of New York called up the president of U.S. Down in Washington D.C. To ask, pushed away his half-finished. To ask him for help, and the president, who at the moment was having breakfast in his pajamas, quickly pushed away his half-finished plate of sugar crisps and started pressing buttons right and left to 50 states, from Alaska to Florida, from Pennsylvania to Hawaii. The alarm was sounded, and the word went out that the biggest bomb in this history of the world was hovering over New York City, and that at any moment it might go. Come on, centipede, bite through the first string, James ordered. The centipede took one of the silk strings between his teeth and bit through it, and once again a single seagull came away from the rest of the flock and went flying off on its own. Bite another, James ordered. The centipede withdrew another string. Why aren't we singing? we are sinking. No, we aren't. Don't forget the pitch is a lot lighter now than when we started out, James told them. It lost an awful lot of juice when all those hailstones hit it in the night. Cut away to 2 more seagulls sent back. Ah, that's better. Here we go. Now we really are sinking. Yes, this is perfect. Don't bite anymore. Sandpit. Or we'll sink too fast. Gently does it. Slowly the great peach began losing height, and the buildings and streets down below began coming closer and closer. Do you think we'll all get our pictures in the papers when we get down? The ladybug asked. My goodness, I've forgotten to polish my boots, the sandpit said. Everyone must help me to polish my boots before we arrive. Oh, for heaven's sake, said the earthworm. Can't you ever stop thinking about? But he never finished his sentences for sudden whoosh. And they looked up and saw a huge four-engined plane come shooting out of a nearby cloud and go whizzing past them, not more than 20 feet over their heads. This was actually the regular early morning passenger plane coming into New York from Chicago, and as it went by, it sliced right through every single one of the silken strings, and immediately the seagulls broke away, and the enormous peach, having nothing to hold it up in the air any longer, went tumbling down toward the earth like a lump of lead. Help, cried the centipede. Save us, cried Miss Spider. We are lost, cried the ladybug. This is the end, cried the old green grasshopper. James, cried the earthworm. Do something, James, quickly, do something. I can't, cried James. I'm sorry, goodbye. Shudder us, everybody. I want to be alone now. Round and upside down went the peach as it plummeted toward the earth, and they were all clinging desperately to the stem to save themselves from being flung into space. Faster and faster it fell, down and down and down and down, racing closer and closer to the houses and streets below, where it would surely smash into a million pieces when it hit. And all the way along Fifth Avenue and Madison Avenue and along all the other streets in the city, people who had not yet reached the underground shelters looked up and saw it coming, and they stopped running and stood there staring in a sort of stupor at what they thought was the biggest bomb in all the world falling out of the sky onto their heads. A few women screamed, others knelt down on the sidewalks and began praying aloud. Strong men turned to one another and said things like, I guess this is Joe, and goodbye everybody, goodbye. And for the next 30 seconds, the whole city held its breath, waiting for the end to come. Goodbye, Ladybug, guessed James, clinging to the stem of the falling peach. Goodbye, Sandpet. Goodbye, everybody. There were only a few seconds to go now, and it looked as though they were going to fall right in among all tallest buildings. James could see the skyscrapers rushing up to meet them at the most awful speed, and most of them had square flat tops, but the very tallest of them all had a top that disappeared off into a long sharp point like an enormous silver needle sticking up into the sky. And it was precisely onto the top of this needle that the peach fell. There was a squelch. The needle went in deep, and suddenly there was the giant peach cove and spiked upon the very pinnacle of the Empire State Building. It was really an amazing sight, and in 2 or 3 minutes, as soon as the people below realized that this now couldn't possibly be a bomb, they came pouring out of the shelters and the subways to gape at the marvel. The streets for half a mile around the building were jammed with men and women, and when the word spread that there were actually living things moving about on the on the top of the great round ball, then everyone went wild with excitement. "It's a flying saucer," they shouted. "They are from outer space. They are men from Mars. Or maybe they came from the moon." And a man who had a pair of binoculars to his eyes said, "They look pretty pickler to me, I'll tell you that." Police cars and fire engines came screaming in from all over the city and pulled up outside the Empire State Building. 200 firemen and 600 policemen swarmed into the building and went up in the elevators as high as they could go. Then they poured out onto the observation roof, which is the place where tourists stand, just at the bottom of the spike. All the policemen were holding their guns at the ready, with their fingers on the triggers, and the firemen were clutching their hatchets. But from where they stood, almost directly underneath the pit, they could actually see the travelers up on top. "Aha there," shouted the chief of police. "Come out and show yourselves." Suddenly the great brown head of the centipede appeared over the side of the peach. His black eyes, as large and round as 2 marbles, glared down at the policeman and the fireman below. Then his monstrous, ugly face broke into a wide grin. The policeman and The firemen all started shouting at once. "Look out!" they cried. "Look out!" they cried. It's a dragon. It's a dragon. It's a vampire. It's a gorgon. It's a sea serpent. It's a frog. It's a manticore." 3 firemen and 5 policemen fainted and had to be carried away. "It's a snowswanger," cried the chief of police. "It's a doodle," yelled the head of the fire department. The centipede kept on grinning. He seemed to be enjoying enormously the commotion that he was causing. "And now see here," shouted the chief of police, cupping his hands to his mouth. "You listen to me. I want you to tell me exactly where you come from." "We have come from thousands of miles away," the centipede shouted back, grinning more broadly than ever and showing his brown teeth. There you are," cried the chief of police. "I told you they came from Mars." "I guess you're right," said the head of the fire department. At this point, the old green-gray shopper poked his huge green head over the side of the pit alongside the centipedes. 6 more big strong men fainted when they saw him. That once and quink, oink, screamed the head of the fire department. "I just know it's an oink or a cockatrice," yelled the chief of police. "Stand back, man. It may jump down on us any moment." "What on earth are they talking about?" the old green-gray shopper said to the centipede. "Search me," the centipede answered, "but they seem to be in an awful stew about something." The Miss Spider's large black murderous-looking head, which to a stranger was probably the most terrifying of all, appeared next to the grasshoppers. "Snakes and ladders," yelled the head of the fire department. "We are finished now. It's a giant scorpla." "It's worse than that," cried the chief of police. "It's a vermicus gnat. Oh, just look at its vermicious, gruesome face. Is that the kind that eats fully grown men for breakfast?" the head of the fire department asked, going white as a sheet. "I'm afraid it is," the chief of police answered. "Oh, please, why doesn't someone help us to get down from here?" Miss Spider called out. "It's making me giddy." "This could be a trick," said the head of the fire department. "Don't anyone make a move until I say." "They probably got space guns," muttered the chief of police. "But we've got to do something," the head of fire department announced grimly. "About 5 million people are standing down there on the streets watching us." "Then why don't you put up a ladder?" the chief of police asked him. "I'll stand at the bottom and hold it steady for you while you go up and see what's happening." "Thanks very much," snapped the head of the fire department. Soon there were no less than 7 large, fantastic faces peering down over the side of the pit. The centipedes, the old green grasshoppers, Miss Spiders, the earthworms, the ladybugs, the silkworms, and the glowworms, and a sort of panic was beginning to break out among the firemen and the policemen on the rooftop. Then all at once the panic stopped, and a great gasp of astonishment went up all around, for now a small boy was seen to be standing up there beside the other creatures. His hair was blowing in the wind, and he was laughing and waving and calling out, "Hello, everybody! Hello!" For a few moments, the man below just stood and stared and gaped, and they simply couldn't believe their eyes. "Bless my soul!" cried the head of the fire department, going red in the face. "It really is a little boy, isn't it? Don't be frightened of us, please," James called out. "We are so glad to be here." "What about those others beside you?" shouted the chief of police. Are any of them dangerous?" Of course they are not dangerous," James answered. "They are the nicest creatures in the world. Allow me to introduce them to you one by one, and then I'm sure you'll believe me. My friends, this is the centipede, and let me make it known, he's so sweet and gentle that the Queen of Spain again and again has summoned him by phone to babysit and sing and knit and be a chaperone when nurse is off and all the royal children are alone. Small wonder, said a fair man, they are no longer on the throne. The earthworm, on the other hand, said James, beginning to expand, is great for digging up the land and making all soils never. Moreover, you should understand, he would be absolutely grand for digging subway tunnels, for making you a saver, and the grasshopper, ladies and gents, is a bone in millions and millions of ways. You have only to ask him to give you a tune, and he plays and he plays and he plays as a toy for your children. He's perfectly sweet. There's nothing so good in the shops. You have only to tickle the soles of his feet, and he hops and he hops and he hops. And now, without excuse, I would like to introduce this charming glowworm, lover of simplicity. It's really rather clever, for thereafter you'll never have the slightest need for using electricity. At which no less than 52 policemen cried, if this is true, that creature will get some fabulous publicity. And here we have Miss Spider with a mile of thread inside her, who has personally requested me to say that she has never met Miss Moffat on her charming little tuffet. If she had, she would not have frightened her away. Should her looks sometimes alarm you, then I don't think it would harm you to repeat at least 100 times a day. I must never kill a spider. I must only help and guide her and invite her in the nursery to play. And here's my darling ladybug, so beautiful, so kind. My greatest comfort since this trip began. She has 400 children, and she has left them all behind. But they're coming on the next page if they can. And now the silkworm, James went on. Whole silk will bear comparison with all the greatest silks there are in Rome and Philadelphia. If you would research the whole world through, from Paraguay to Timbuktu, I don't think you would yield one bit of silk that could compare with it. Even the shops in Singapore don't have the stuff, and what's more, the silkworm had, I'll have you know, the honor not so long ago to spin and wave and sew and press the Queen of England's wedding dress, and she's already made and sent a waistcoat for your president. Well, good for her, the cops cried out, and all at once a might shout went up around the Empire State. Let's get them down at once. Why wait? Five minutes later, they were all safely down, and James was excitedly telling his story to a group of flabbergasted officials, and suddenly everyone who had come over on the pitch was a hero. They were all escorted to the steps of City Hall, where the mayor of New York made a speech of welcome, and while he was doing this, 100 steeplejacks armed with ropes and ladders and police swarmed up to the top of the Empire State Building and lifted the giant peach of the spike and lowered it to the ground. Then the mayor shouted, we must now have a ticker tape parade for our wonderful visitors." And so a procession was formed, and in the leading car, which was an enormous open limousine, sat James and all his friends. Next came the giant peach itself. Men with cranes and hooks had quickly hoisted it onto a very large truck, and There now sat, looking just as huge and proud and brave as ever. There was of course a bit of a hole in the bottom of it, where the spike of the Empire State Building had gone in. But who cared about that, or indeed about the peach juice that was dripping out of it onto the street behind the peach, skidding about all over the place in the peach juice. Came the mayor's limousine, and behind the mayor's limousine came about 20 other limousines carrying all the important people of the city. And the crowds went wild with excitement. They lined the streets and they leaned out of the windows of the skyscrapers, cheering and yelling and screaming and clapping and throwing out bits of white paper and ticker tape. And James and his friends stood up in their car and waved back at them as they went by. Then a rather curious thing happened. The procession was moving slowly along 50th Avenue when suddenly a little girl in a red dress ran out from the crowd and shouted, "Oh, James, could I please have just a tiny taste of your marvelous peach?" "Help yourself," James shouted back. "Eat all you want. It won't keep forever anyway." No sooner had he said this than about 50 other children exploded out of the crowd and came running onto the street. "Can we have some too?" they cried. "Of course you can," James answered. "Everyone can have some." The children jumped up onto the truck and swarmed like ants all over the giant peach, eating to their heart's contact. And as the news of what was happening spread quickly from street to street, more and more boys and girls came running from all directions to join the feast. Soon there was a trail of children a mile long, chasing after the peach as it proceeds slowly up 50th Avenue. Really, it was a fantastic sight. To some people, it looked as tough the Pied Piper of Hamelin had suddenly descended upon New York. And to James, who had never dreamed that there could be so many children as this in the world, it was the most marvelous thing that had ever happened. By the time the procession was over, the whole gigantic fruit had been completely eaten up, and only the big brown stone in the middle, licked clean and shiny by 10,000 eager little tongues, was left standing on the track. And thus the journey ended, but the travels lived on. Every one of them became rich and successful in the new country. The centipede was made vice president in charge of sales, a high-class firm of boats and shoe manufacturers. The earthworm, with his lovely pink skin, was employed by a company that made women's face creams to speak commercials on television. The silkworm and Miss Spider, after they had both been taught to make nylon thread instead of silk, set up a factory together and made ropes for tightrope walkers. And the glowworm became the light inside the torch of the Statue of Liberty, and thus saved a grateful city from having to pay a huge electricity bill every year. The old green grasshopper became a member of New York Symphony Orchestra, where his playing was greatly admired. The ladybug, who had been haunted all her life by the fear that her house was on fire and her children all gone, made the head of the fire department and lived happily ever after. And as for the enormous peach stone, it was set up permanently in a place of honor in Central Park and became a famous monument. But it was not only a famous monument, it was also a famous house, and inside the famous house there lived a famous person, James Henry Trotter himself. And all you had to do any day of the week was to go and knock upon the door, and the door would always be open to you, and you would always be asked to come inside and see the famous room where James had first met his friends. And sometimes if you were very lucky, you would find the old green grasshopper in there as well, resting peacefully in a chair before the fire, or perhaps it would be the ladybug who had dropped in for a cup of tea and a gossip, or the centipede to show off a new batch of particularly elegant boots that he had just acquired. Every day of the week, hundreds and hundreds of children from far and near came pouring the city to see the marvelous peach stone in the park. And James Henry Trotter, who once, if you remember, had been the saddest and loneliest little boy that you could find, now had all the friends and playmates in the world, and because so many of them were always begging him to tell again the story of his adventures on the beach, he thought it would be nice if one day he sat down and wrote it as a book. So he did, and that is what you have just finished reading. about the author. Roald Dahl is the author of some of the finest and most widely read children's book ever published, including Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach, and Deniz, the Champion of the World. He is also celebrated for his wonderfully wicked short stories for adults.
"We're off!" someone was shouting. "We're off at last!" James woke up with a jump and looked about him. The creatures were all out of their hammocks and moving excitedly around the room. Suddenly the floor gave a great heave, as though an earthquake were taking place. "Here we go!" shouted the old green grasshopper, hopping up and down with excitement. "Hold on tight!" "What's happening?" cried James, leaping out of his hammock. "What's going on?" The ladybug, who was obviously a kind and gentle creature, came over and stood beside him. "In case you don't know it," she said, "we're about to depart forever from the top of this ghastly hill that we've been living for so long. We're about to roll away inside this great, beautiful peach to a land of what?" asked James. "Never you mind," said the ladybug, "but nothing could be worse than this desolate hilltop, and those two repulsive aunts of yours." "Here, here!" they all shouted. "Here!" "You may not have noticed it," the ladybug went on, "but the whole garden, even before it reaches the steep edge of the hill, happens to be on a steep slope. And therefore the only thing that has been stopping this peach from rolling away right from the beginning is the thick stem attaching it to the tree. Break the stem and off we go." "Watch it!" cried Miss Spider, as the room gave another violent lurch. "Here we go." "Not quite, not quite." "At this moment," continued the ladybug, "our centipede, who has a pair of jaws as sharp as razors, is up there on top of the peach, nibbling away at that stem. In fact, he must be nearly through it, as you can tell from the way we're lurching about. Would you like me to take you under my wings, so that you won't fall over when we start rolling?" "That's very kind of you," said James, "but I think I'll be all right." Just then the centipede stuck his grinning face through a hole in the ceiling and shouted, "I've done it! We're off! We're off!" the others cried. "We're off!" "The journey begins," shouted the centipede, "and who knows where it will end," muttered the earthworm. "If you have anything to do with it, it can only mean trouble." "Nonsense," said the ladybug. "We are now about to visit the most marvelous places and see the most wonderful things. Isn't that so, centipede?" "There is no knowing what we shall see," cried the centipede. "We may see a creature with 49 heads, who lives in a desolate snow, and whenever he catches cold, he has 49 noses to blow. We may see the venomous pink-spotted scrunch, who can chew up a man with one bite. It likes to eat 5 of them roasted for lunch, and 18 for its supper at night. We may see a dragon, and nobody knows that we won't see a unicorn there. We may see a terrible monster with toes growing out of the tufts of his hair. We may see the sweet little bitty bright hen, so playful, so kind and well-bred, and such beautiful eggs. You just boil them and then they explode and they blow off your head. A gnu and a gnosaurus surely you'll see, and the enormous and ignorable gnat, whose sting when it stings you goes in at the knee, and comes out through the top of your head. We may even get lost and be frozen by frost. We may die in an earthquake or tremor, or nastier still, we may even be tossed on the horns of a furious dilemma. But who cares? Let us go from this horrible hill. Let us roll, let us bowl, let us plunge. Let's go rolling and bowling and spinning until we're away from old Spiker and Sponge. 1 second later, slowly, insidiously, oh, most gently, the grey peach started to lean forward and steal into motion. The whole room began to tilt over, and all the furniture went sliding across the floor, and crashed against the far wall. So did James and the ladybug, and the old green grasshopper, and Miss Spider and the earthworm, also the centipede who had just come slithering quickly down the wall. Outside in the garden at that very moment, Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker had just taken their places at the front gate, each with a bunch of tickets in her hand, and the first stream of early morning sightseers was visible in the distance climbing up the hill to view the peach. "We shall make a fortune today," Aunt Spiker was saying. "Just look at all those people." "I wonder what became of that horrid little boy of ours last night," Aunt Sponge said. "He never did come back in, did he?" "He probably fell down in the dark and broke his leg," Aunt Spiker said. "Or his neck, maybe," Aunt Sponge said hopefully. "Just wait till I get my hands on him," Aunt Spiker said, waving her cane. "He'll never want to stay out all night again by the time I've finished with him. Good gracious me, what's that awful noise?" Both women swung around to look. The noise, of course, had been caused by the giant peach crashing through the fence that surrounded it, and now, gathering speed every second, it came rolling across the garden toward the place where Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker were standing. They gaped, they screamed, they started to run. They panicked. They both got into each other's way. They began pushing and jostling, and each one of them was thinking only about saving herself. Aunt Sponge, the fat one, tripped over a box that she'd brought along to keep the money in, and fell flat on her face. Aunt Spiker immediately tripped over Aunt Sponge, and came down on top of her. They both lay on the ground, fighting and clawing and yelling and struggling frantically to get up again. But before they could do this, the mighty peach was upon them. There was a crunch, and then there was silence. The peach rolled on, and behind it Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker lay ironed out upon the grass, as flat and thin and lifeless as a couple of paper dolls cut out of a picture book. And now the peach had broken out of the garden and was over the edge of the hill, rolling and bouncing down the steep slope at a terrific pace. Faster and faster and faster it went, and the crowds of people who were climbing up the hill suddenly caught sight of this terrible monster plunging down upon them, and they screamed and scattered to right and left as it went hurtling by. At the bottom of the hill it charged across the road, knocking over a telegraph pole and flattening two parked automobiles as it went by. Then it rushed madly across about 20 fields, breaking down all the fences and hedges in its path. It went right through the middle of a herd of fine Jersey cows, and then through a flock of sheep, and then through a paddock full of horses, and then through a yard full of pigs. And soon the whole countryside was a seething mass of panic-stricken animals stampeding in all directions. The peach was still going at a tremendous speed, with no sign of slowing down, and about a mile farther on it came to a village. Down the main street of the village it rolled, with people leaping frantically out of its path, right and left, and at the end of the street it went crashing right through the wall of an enormous building, and out the other side, leaving two gaping round holes in the brickwork. This building happened to be a famous factory where they made chocolate, and almost at once a great river of warm melted chocolate came pouring out of the holes in the factory wall. A minute later, this brown sticky mess was flowing through every street in the village, oozing under the doors of houses and into people's shops and gardens. Children were wading in it up to their knees, and some were even trying to swim in it, and all of them were sucking it into their mouths in great greedy gulps and shrieking with joy. But the peach rushed on across the countryside, on and on and on, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Cowsheds, stables, pigsties, barns, bungalows, high ricks, anything that got in its way went toppling over like a ninepin. An old man sitting quietly beside a stream had his fishing rod whisked out of his hands as it went dashing by, and a woman called Daisy Entwistle was standing so close to it as it passed that she had the skin taken off the tip of her long nose. Would it ever stop? Why should it? A round object will always keep on rolling as long as it is on a downhill slope, and in this case the land sloped downhill all the way until it reached the ocean, the same ocean that James had begged his aunt to be allowed to visit the day before. Well, perhaps he was going to visit it now. The Peach was rushing closer and closer to it every second, and closer also to the towering white cliffs that came first. These cliffs are the most famous in the whole of England, and they are hundreds of feet high. Below them the sea is deep and cold and hungry. Many ships have been swallowed up and lost forever on this part of the coast, and all the men who were in sailed them as well. The Peach was now only 100 yards away from the cliff. Now 50, now 20, now 10, now 5, and when it reached the edge of the cliff, it seemed to leap up into the sky and hang there suspended for a few seconds, still turning over and over in the air. Then it began to fall. Down, 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 down. Smack! It hit the water with a colossal splash and sank like a stone. But a few seconds later, up it came again, and this time up it stayed, floating serenely upon the surface of the water. At this moment, the scene inside the Peach itself was one of the indescribable chaos. James Henry Trotter was lying bruised and battered on the floor of the room amongst a tangled mass of centipede and earthworm and spider and ladybug and glowworm and old green grasshopper. In the whole history of the world, no travelers had ever had a more terrible journey than these unfortunate creatures. It had started out well, with much laughing and shouting, and for the first few seconds, as the Peach had begun to roll slowly forward, nobody had minded being rumbled about a little bit. And when it went bump, and the centipede had shouted, "That was Aunt Sponge," and then bump again, "That was Aunt Spiker," there had been a tremendous burst of cheering all around. But as soon as the Peach rolled out of the garden and began to go down the steep hill, rushing and plunging and bounding madly downward, and then the whole thing became a nightmare. James found himself being flung up against the ceiling, then back onto the floor, then sideways against the wall, then up onto the ceiling again, then up and down, and back and forth, and round, and at the same time all the other creatures were flying through the air in every direction. And so were their chairs and the sofa, not to mention the 42 boots belonging to the centipede. Everything and all of them were being rattled around like peas inside an enormous rattle that was being rattled by a mad giant who refused to stop. To make it worse, something went wrong with the glowworm's lighting system, and the room was in pitchy darkness. There were screams and yells and curses and cries of pain, and everything kept going round and round, and once James made a frantic grab at some thick bars sticking out from the wall, only to find that they were a couple of the centipede's legs. "Let's go, you idiot," shouted the centipede, kicking himself free. And James was promptly flung across the room into the old green grasshopper's horny lap. Twice he got tangled up in Miss Spider's legs, and toward the end, the poor earthworm, who was cracking himself like a whip every time, every time he flew through the air from one side of the room to the other, coiled himself around James's body and in a panic and refused to unwind. Oh, it was a frantic and terrible trip, but it was all over now, and the room was suddenly very still and quiet. Everybody was beginning slowly and painfully to disentangle himself from everybody else. "Let's have some light," shouted the centipede. "Yes," they cried, "light, give us some light." "I'm trying," answered the poor glowworm. "I am doing my best, please be patient." They all waited in silence. Then a faint greenish light began to glimmer out of the glowworm's tail, and this gradually became stronger and stronger until it was anyway enough to see by. "Some great journey," the centipede said, limping across the room. "I shall never be the same again," murmured the earthworm. "Nor I," the ladybug said. "It's taken years off my life." "But my dear friends," cried the old green grasshopper, trying to be cheerful, "we are there." "Where?" they asked. "Where? Where is there?" "I don't know," the old green grasshopper said, "but I'll bet it's somewhere good." "We are probably at the bottom of a coal mine," the earthworm said gloomily. "We certainly went down and down and down, very suddenly at the last moment. I felt it in my stomach. I still feel it." "Perhaps we're in the middle of a beautiful country full of songs and music," the old green grasshopper said. "Or near the seashore, said James eagerly, "with lots of other children down on the Seine for me to play with." "Pardon me," murmured the ladybug, turning a trifle pale, "but am I wrong in thinking that we seem to be bobbing up and down?" "Bobbing up and down?" they cried. "What on earth do you mean?" "You're still giddy from the journey," the old green grasshopper told her. "You'll get over it in a minute. Is everybody ready to go upstairs now and take a look around?" "Yes," they chorused. "Come on, let's go." "I refuse to show myself out of the doors in my bare feet," the centipede said. "I have to get my boots on again first." "For heaven's sake, let's not go through all that nonsense again," the earthworm said. "Let's all lend the centipede a hand and get it over with," Ladybug said. "Come on." So they did, all except Miss Spider, who set about weaving a long rope ladder that would reach from the floor up to a hole in the ceiling. The old green grasshopper had wisely said that they must not risk going out of the side entrance when they didn't know where they were, but must first of all go up onto the top of the peach and have a look around. So half an hour later, when the rope ladder had been finished and hung, and the 42nd boot had been laced neatly onto the centipede's 42nd foot, they were all ready to go out. Amidst mounting excitement and shouts of "Here we go, boys, the promised land. I can't wait to see it," the whole company climbed up the ladder one by one and disappeared into a dark, soggy tunnel in the ceiling that went steeply, almost vertically upward. A minute later, they were out in the open, standing on the very top of the peach, near the stem, blinking their eyes in the strong sunlight and peering nervously around. "What happened? Where are we? But this is impossible, unbelievable, terrible." "I told you we were bobbing up and down," the ladybug said. "We're in the middle of the sea," cried James, and indeed they were. A strong current and a high wind had carried the peach so quickly away from the shore that already the land was out of sight. All around them lay the vast black ocean, deep and hungry. Little waves were bibbling against the sides of the peach. "But how did it happen?" they cried. "Where are the fields? Where are we? Where are the woods? Where is England?" Nobody, not even James, could understand how in the world a thing like this could have come about. "Ladies and gentlemen," the old green grasshopper said, trying very hard to keep the fear and disappointment out of his voice, "I'm afraid that we find ourselves in a rather awkward situation." "Awkward?" cried the earthworm. "My dear old green grasshopper, we are finished. Every one of us is about to perish. I may be blind, you know, but the much I can see quite clearly." "Off with my boots!" shouted the centipede. "I cannot swim with my boots on." "I can't swim at all!" cried the ladybug. "Nor can I," wailed the glowworm. "Nor I," said Miss Spider. "None of us 3 girls can swim a single stroke." "But you won't have to swim," said James calmly. "We are floating beautifully, and sooner or later a ship is bound to come along and pick us up." They all stared at him in an amazement. "Are you quite sure that we are not sinking?" the ladybug asked. "Of course I'm sure," answered James. "Go and look for yourselves." They all ran over the side of the beach and peered down at the water below. "The boy is quite right," the old green grasshopper said. "We are floating beautifully. Now we must all sit down and keep perfectly calm. Everything will be all right in the end." "What absolute nonsense!" cried the earthworm. "Nothing is ever all right in the end, and well you know it." "Poor earthworm," said the ladybug, whispering in James's ear. "He loves to make everything into a disaster. He hates to be happy. He's only happy when he's gloomy." "Now, isn't that odd? But then I suppose just being an earthworm is enough to make a person pretty gloomy, don't you agree?" "If this beach is not going to sink," the earthworm was saying, "and if we are not going to be drowned, then every one of us is going to starve to death instead. Do you realize we haven't had a thing to eat since yesterday morning?" "By golly, he's right," cried the centipede. "For once, earthworm is right." "Of course I'm right," the earthworm said, "and we are not likely to find anything around here either. We shall get thinner and thinner, and thirstier, and we shall all die a slow and grisly death from starvation. I'm dying already. I am slowly shriveling up for want of food. Personally, I would rather drown." "But God heavens, you must be blind," said James. "You know very well I'm blind," snapped the earthworm. "There is no need to rub it in." "I didn't mean that," said James quickly. "I'm sorry, but can't you see that—" "See?" shouted the poor earthworm. "How can I see if I am blind?" James took a deep, slow breath. "Can't you realize," he said patiently, "that we have enough food here to last us for weeks and weeks?" "Where?" they said. "Where?" "Why, the beach, of course. Our whole ship is made of food." "Jumping James," they cried. "We never thought of that." "My dear James," said the old green grasshopper, laying a front leg affectionately on James's shoulder. "I don't know what we'd do without you. You're so clever." "Ladies and gentlemen, we are saved again." "We are most certainly not," said the earthworm. "You must be crazy. You can't eat the ship. It's the only thing that is keeping us up." "We shall starve if we don't," said the centipede. "And we shall drown if we do," cried the earthworm. Oh dear," said the old green grasshopper. "Now we're worse off than before." "Couldn't we just eat a little bit of it?" asked Miss Spider. "I am so dreadfully hungry." "You can eat all you want," James answered. "It would take us weeks and weeks to make any sort of dent in this enormous peach. Surely you can see that." "God heavens, he's right again," cried the old green grasshopper, clapping his hands. "It would take weeks and weeks. Of course it would. But let's not go making a lot of holes all over the deck. I think we'd better simply scoop it out of the tunnel over there, the one that we've just come up by." "An excellent idea," said the ladybug. "What are you looking so worried about, earthworm?" the centipede asked. "What's your problem?" "The problem is," the earthworm said, "the problem is Well, the problem is that there is no problem. Everyone burst out laughing. Cheer up, Earthworm, they said. Come and eat. And they all went over to the tunnel entrance and began scooping out great chunks of juicy, golden-colored peach flesh. Oh, marvelous, said the centipede, stuffing it into his mouth. Delicious, said the old green grasshopper. Just fabulous, said the glowworm. Oh my, said the ladybug primly. What a heavenly taste! She looked up at James, and she smiled, and James smiled back at her. They sat down on the deck together, both of them chewing away happily. You know, James, the ladybug said, up until this moment, I have never in my life tasted anything except those tiny little green flies that live on rose bushes. They have a perfectly delightful flavor, but this peach is even better. Isn't it glorious? Miss Spider said, coming over to join them. Personally, I had always thought that a big, juicy cod in the wet blue bottle was the finest dinner in the world until I taste this. What a flavor, the centipede cried. It's terrific. There is nothing like it. There never has been. And I should know because I personally have tasted all the finest foods in the world. Whereupon the centipede, with his mouth full of peach, and with juice running down all over his chin, suddenly burst into song. I've eaten many strange and scrumptious dishes in my life, like jellied gnats and dentifrice and earwigs cooked in slime, and mice with rice. They are really nice when roasted in their prime. I've eaten fresh mud burgers by the greatest cooks there are, and scrambled eggs and stink-bird eggs and hornets stewed in tar, and pails of snails and lizard tails and beetles by the jar. I often eat boiled slobbiges. They're grand when served beside minced doodlebugs and curried slugs. And have you ever tried mosquito's toes and wempfish roes, most delicately fried? I'm mad for crispy wasp stings on a piece of buttered toast, and pickled spines of porcupines, and then a gorgeous roast of dragon's flesh, well bunged, not fresh. It costs $1 at most. I crave the tasty tentacles of octopi for tea. I like hot dogs. I love hot frogs, and surely you'll agree. A plate of soil with engine's oil, a super recipe. For dinner on my birthday, shall I tell you what I want? Hot noodles made from poodles on a slice of green hose, and a rather smelly jelly made of armadillo's toes. Now comes, the centipede declared, the burden of my speech. These foods are rare beyond compare. Some are right of the reach. But there's no doubt I'd go without a million plates of each for one small mite, one tiny bite of this fantastic peach. Everybody was feeling happy now. The sun was shining brightly out of a soft blue sky, and the day was calm. The giant peach, with the sunlight glinting on its side, was like a massive golden ball sailing upon a silver sea. Look, cried the centipede just as they were finishing their meal. Look at the funny thin black thing gliding through the water over there. They all swung around to look. There are 2 of them, said Miss Spider. There are lots of them, said the ladybug. What are they? Asked the earthworm, getting worried. They must be some kind of fish, said the old green grasshopper. Perhaps they have come along to say hello. They are sharks, cried the earthworm. I'll bet you anything you like that they are sharks, and they have come along to eat us up. What absolute not, said the centipede, but his voice seemed suddenly to have become a little shaky, and he wasn't laughing. I am positive They are sharks, said the earthworm. I just know that they are sharks. And so, in actual fact, did everybody else, but they were too frightened to admit it. There was a short silence. They all peered down anxiously at the sharks, who were cruising slowly round and round the beach. Just assuming that they are sharks, the centipede said, there still can't possibly be any danger if we stay up there. But even as he spoke, one of those thin black fins suddenly changed direction and came cutting swiftly through the water, right up the side to the side of the beach itself. The shark paused and stared up at the company with small evil eyes. Go away, they shouted. Go away, you filthy beast. Slowly, almost lazily, the shark opened his mouth and made a lunge at the beach. They all watched aghast. And now, as though at a signal from the leader, all the other sharks came swimming in toward the beach, and they clustered around it and began to attack it furiously. There must have been 20 or 30 of them at least, all pushing and fighting and lashing their tails and churning the water into forth. Panic and pandemonium broke out immediately on top of the beach. Oh, we are finished now, cried Miss Spider, wringing her feet. They will eat up the whole beach, and then there'll be nothing left for us to stand on, and they'll start on us. She is right, shouted the ladybug. We are lost forever. Oh, I don't want to be eaten, wailed the earthworm, but they will take me first of all, because I am so fat and juicy, and I have no bones. Is there nothing we can do? Asked the ladybug, appealing to James. Surely you can think of a way out of this. Suddenly they were all looking at James. Think, begged Miss Spider. Think, James, think. Come on, said the centipede. Come on, James. There must be something we can do. Their eyes waited upon him, tense, anxious, pathetically hopeful.